The following program is an original production of WICC PBS Chicago.
This week on In the Loop, the bail trap. Is the cash bond system in Cook County broken, and does it discriminate against low-income offenders?
The fact that they're sitting here is only because they can't come up with a certain dollar figure. And we can't have that. We can't have that in our society.
Sanctuary City. Mayor Emanuel says Chicago will continue to welcome immigrants. Is he sending a message to the new president-elect?
You are safe in Chicago. You are secure in Chicago. And you are supported in Chicago.
Plus, youth concussions are on the rise in football, hockey, and soccer. What can be done to protect young athletes?
We really didn't diagnose concussions unless children had loss of consciousness.
And this local company is as Chicago as deep dish pizza, hot dogs, and Wrigley Field.
It started out just to be this unique idea of a vending machine that could actually make you your souvenir in front of you in less than a minute.
Stay with us for these stories and more tonight on In the Loop. Good evening, I'm Chris Bury. Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart wants to abolish the cash bail system. Now, defendants typically have to put up 10% of a bond set by a judge. But all too often, Dart says the system means the poor languish in jail because they don't have the money to post bond. And remember, 90% of the inmates at Cook County Jail have not been convicted of a crime. And now Sheriff Dart is a leading voice in a chorus calling for major reforms.
Hey! Come on now! Record this!
A tense confrontation between an off-duty Chicago police sergeant and an Indianapolis man who allegedly failed to drop his weapon when asked is caught on camera and ends in gunfire. 25-year-old Joshua Beal is shot by police. The victim's brother, Michael, is arrested after attempting to disarm the off-duty officer who killed his brother, and becomes one of the more than 8,000 men and women held in pretrial detention at Cook County Jail. A judge set bond at $500,000, which meant Michael would be responsible for 10% or $50,000. Katrina Walker has been in Michael Beal's shoes. She spent 9 months in Cook County Jail awaiting trial. The mother of 3 was charged with retail theft last year after stealing a $23 outfit for her 4-year-old daughter.
I lost my job, my family. I lost relationships with my family. You know, it was real hard.
Unable to meet the $1,500 required for the $15,000 bond set for her, Katrina took a plea in an effort to get back to her children and family.
There was a lot of girls in the same situation, waiting to get bailed out. Their family didn't have no money. They didn't have the money. So it's like when you go to jail, your family be locked up too.
The Constitution is violated whenever bail is set in an amount that is too high for the defendant to post, and it results in disastrous consequences for the taxpayers, for the defendant, and for society in general.
Attorney Matthew Piers is among those filing a class action lawsuit against Sheriff Tom Dart and the Cook County Circuit judges. It alleges that thousands are being illegally detained in Cook County Jail due solely to their inability to pay their cash bonds. Here in Cook County, it costs $150 a day to keep someone locked up in pretrial detention.
Looking at someone like Katrina, who was in for 9 months, that cost taxpayers a lot in the direct cost of her incarceration, over $35,000 in fact, but it also cost Katrina and her family and her community.
We caught up with Charlene Grace of the Chicago Community Bond Fund as she was working to secure the release of Michael Beal, the brother of police shooting victim Joshua Beal. Charlin is part of a coalition of lawmakers, attorneys, and advocates working to end the cash bail system in the state of Illinois and across the nation.
It's a very serious determination that these judges are making.
Okay, if everybody would kindly stand up and raise your right hand.
If you let a dangerous person out, of course, that's dangerous to all of us. On the other hand, the decision to keep somebody incarcerated, and that is a decision that a judge is in fact making when he sets a bail at an amount higher than a defendant can make, that has drastic consequences for that defendant. Consequences which run the range from higher likelihood of being convicted, higher likelihood of getting a worse prison sentence, higher likelihood of completely disrupting that person's economic and social and personal life so that reintegration into society at some point becomes that much harder, and we pay for it. All of us pay for it.
But there are still some who believe cash bail provides an incentive to comply with the courts.
Some of the opposition comes from people who think we are a safer society with a cash bail system.
There is no evidence, zero evidence, the cash bail system has worked. None.
Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart, who was a defendant in the lawsuit, agrees.
You won't be any less safe without a cash bail system. That in jurisdictions where they've done that, they haven't found that to be the case.
One thing both Piers and Dart can agree on is that Washington, D.C. is a model for reform. The district has all but eliminated the cash bail system. That has saved nearly $400 million a year by releasing defendants into supervision programs that are far less expensive than keeping them behind bars. The district also found that 90% of the defendants show up for their court dates and 91% of them stay out of trouble while free. For people like Arnold Julian, the class action lawsuit is just one piece of the puzzle. They also want to see a change in the law.
With the current legislation that we have on the books in Illinois, it says that a judge must consider 30 different things before issuing the bond. Bond court on average is 15 to 27 seconds long, and there's absolutely no way you can consider 30 things, especially when you have 100 to 200 people coming through bond court on a nightly basis.
The system itself is not working. And we need to change that. We need to change this system so it's not a system that cares about how wealthy you are.
Matthew Piers maintains that the Cook County Sheriff and his staff are working diligently toward helping to reduce and eliminate the cash bond system in Cook County.
The issue of as far as how quickly can we get things in motion, this will take a little bit of time to legislatively change from a bail system to a non-bail system.
Until that day comes, those on pretrial detention will have to rely on organizations like the Chicago Community Bond Fund, which last Thursday, with the help of Black Lives Matter and an anonymous donor, secured $50,000 for Michael Beale's release. He walked out of Cook County a free man and into the arms of his family. Last year in Cook County, more than 1,000 inmates spent more time in pretrial detention than the prison terms for their convictions. And now joining us are Todd Belcour, Executive Director of Social Change, Hillary Gowans, Managing Editor for the Illinois Policy Institute, and Dave McKinney, reporters for Reuters. And welcome, everybody. So, Todd, let me begin with you. Is reforming this system, perhaps eliminating it, is this an idea whose time has come?
I think so. I think it's properly labeled as a bail trap. I mean, anytime you have a system that's that ineffective, where we spend nearly $750 million by the county to house people for no other reason possibly besides they're being poor, that's an issue. And I think that's part of the reason why there's already a lawsuit being framed, but it's also a reason why we're all discussing it today, because it's something that's being done successfully in other jurisdictions, and there's no reason for it not to be done here.
And Hillary, just the money saving alone, we heard in the report that it costs about $60,000 a year to keep an inmate. Could Republicans get behind this just on the basis of saving money?
Well, I think criminal justice reform is one of the beautiful things happening here in Illinois. There's a bipartisan coalition coming together. But I think most importantly, people get behind the idea that we have a justice system based on innocence until proven guilty. Right now, the system is keeping people behind bars not because of their innocence or guilt, but because they can or cannot pay. So not only should we be focusing on the immense cost to taxpayers, but this is just not right considering the fact that our justice system is set up the way that it is.
And Dave, when you look at that discrepancy, it seems easy to see that a middle-class person, let's say from the suburbs, somebody in their family gets into trouble, it's relatively easy for them to pull out a credit card and bail that person out of jail. Whereas if you don't have any money, you're stuck.
Well, that's true. And I mean, it just seems like, in your piece there, you spell out really some compelling arguments for this change. I think, as Dart pointed out, it's going to take some time legislatively to make this happen. But, he's a former legislator himself. He knows how the levers of power in Springfield work. I think it'll be interesting to see how what position the governor takes on this, what the police groups and the trial lawyers, how they all come together. But it doesn't seem like this is an issue that's going to draw a ton of controversy in Springfield.
But what about folks who are worried about public safety, in the sense that if there isn't that incentive for a suspected criminal to post up some money, that person's not going to go back to court and they could be on the streets causing more mayhem? What about that argument?
I think the notion that wealth should not determine whether you're incarcerated or not is a big issue. But I think beyond that, is to your point, does this make public safety an issue? And it doesn't. What the data shows pretty clearly is that the people who spend more time in jail are actually more likely to engage in criminal activity, regardless if they were guilty or not when they're initially arrested. And that's a consideration that's often overlooked. The other consideration is the actual human cost, the cost to the family, the person who's being actually detained. In those instances, people lose their jobs, they can lose a roof over their heads, even custody of their children. In those instances, we need to figure out the cost to the family, whether that's something we can live with as well.
What about the judges? Where do they fit in here? I can see them being very worried about eliminating the cash bail system, because if one of those defendants does skip out and create a crime, it goes back to them, that judge who made that decision.
Well, I mean, it's very true, but I think that that has to be demonstrated. I mean, you cited data in there that showed that 90% of the defendants come back to court and were not committing crimes. And as long as there's a carve out here for a judge to say, look, you're accused of committing a violent crime or something that's a threat to society, as long as a judge still has the latitude to exercise judgment about who should have to be detained and not, I don't know that it's going to be a big problem.
The bail system is supposed to mitigate flight risk and ensure public safety. Right now, like Tom Dart said, there's really no evidence to show that that's happening. And electronic monitoring systems like DC is using, if 90% of people are showing up to their court dates, I think you can't really argue with that evidence.
It's kind of interesting and nice to see conservatives and liberals agree on this. Let's move to City Hall. Mayor Emanuel announced this week that Chicago would remain a sanctuary city, one that protects immigrants. In the wake of statements coming out of the Trump administration, Todd, what is the significance of that?
Well, I think it's worth noting that this has been a long-standing policy since Harold Washington. This isn't something new. While Mayor Emanuel is committed to it, this isn't something that's really implicated because Trump got elected or not. I mean, Mayor was right to say outright that while there will be a change in the administration, there won't be a change in our values. And the bottom line is, will be a place where people will be considered safe, will be protected and supported, as you mentioned, but also a place where if you are accused of something, you won't be reported to ICE immediately. You have an opportunity to have your day in court, just like we said everyone else had the opportunity to have in the bail system. And I think that's just consistent with not just our values of inclusion, recognizing that we're a city of immigrants, but also our values of the pillars of our criminal justice system.
But Hillary, there is an implicit threat here from President-elect Trump, who has threatened to cut off federal funding for cities that keep sanctuaries, such as Chicago, such as Seattle, such as San Francisco, and others.
Right, and I think that that's no small threat in a cash-strapped city. But what I think is really interesting here is just that there is such a disconnect between what the mayor says and the policies that he enacts. So the policies that he enacts are just so different. He says to the undocumented and Latino community, you're going to be safe, you're going to be welcome here in Chicago. And yet he's just passed an $8.2 billion budget that relies on more taxes, more fees. Chicagoans are strapped with more than 30 taxes and fees here. Jobs are fleeing the city and the state. So are they really welcome? I'm not sure, because there are no jobs and it's a really expensive city, especially for people.
But just to interrupt here a second, the sanctuary city is kind of a specific program which says that the city is not going to cooperate with the feds when it comes to deportations, right? That's what we're talking about here.
Correct. And honestly, I think that Trump and Rahm, they're not going to agree on a lot of things. This is one of them. We'll see what happens. We really don't know what's going to happen. There are huge financial implications and societal implications. I really just don't know what's going to happen here.
Dave, when you saw that news conference and you saw Emanuel surrounded by members of the Hispanic community, looked like a very political staged event. Does that indicate to you that it looks like Emmanuel's going to run?
Well, I mean, it's another sign. I mean, we just see, you know, there seem to be these subtle indicators. You know, he's getting these really wrenching, difficult financial decisions, the tax increases and such, out of the way early in his term. You know, until there's somebody who emerges who is a credible threat to him, you know, I don't think it's an impossibility that he runs again. I mean, he's well positioned to run again, and it certainly did look like a you know, kind of a bouquet to the, you know, to Latino voters.
Hillary, is that how you read it?
I definitely read it as Rahm trying to curry favor with the Latino community. He almost lost to Chewy in the last election. He knows that this is an important process for him to pursue.
Let's move on to Springfield and Governor Rauner, who would not utter Mr. Trump's name during the campaign, had a telephone conversation with him apparently in the last few days. And Todd, what do you think the relationship is going to be between Illinois, blue state, governor who didn't want anything to do with Trump, and the new Trump administration?
Yeah, I don't think anyone should be confused in thinking that they're allied. I mean, just because they may share a party, they don't share a lot of the ideology or values or approach. So I think there's a legitimately frosty relationship in terms of him not wanting to take advice from Trump, or maybe vice versa. But I don't think it'll really affect the way Rauner governs, and I don't think he'll have much influence over the Trump administration. I think one example of that may be, you know, the automatic voter registration bill that was just, you know, the governor vetoed it, and just the veto was overridden by the Senate. That's something I'm not sure would ever even be considered by a Trump administration. So I think the fact that there was legitimate conversation and Rauner was willing to say things early on in the process that we should do things to make voting registration easier just shows a departure in the way in which they view issues that are really important to everyday people.
And speaking of frosty relationships, Governor Rauner met with Speaker Madigan this week. Dave, you've covered Springfield much of your career. What did you make of that meeting?
Well, the body language was so interesting. The governor invites all the leaders into his office, you know, and it's sort of a tradition before a veto session starts that, you know, all the leaders get together with the governor and they chart out a plan. And in this case, Madigan decided, well, he had another commitment to make. Couldn't make that meeting, and then on the day of the meeting, shows up at the Capitol anyway, and then, you know, the next day when he agrees to come to the meeting, he anoints kind of a mouthpiece, a surrogate for him. So there's a little bit of gamesmanship going on where I think they're trying to scout out, you know, what's in each other's heads. And don't forget, this is coming off of an election that you know, Madigan was painted as an absolute kind of demon by Republicans, and Rauner as well. And so I think there, you know, a lot of that personal animosity from the election is you know, spilling into the talks now about a 6-month spending plan.
So Hillary, how does this first week in Springfield bode for the rest of the year? Well,
they're going to set a tone, and it's going to be important to watch what they decide to focus on. So we're going up to 2 years now without a budget. Right. We've got to focus on these big, important issues. I think that November 8 marked a point at which taxpayers said to Madigan, we don't like how things have been going. We've got $130 billion in pension debt. We've got more than $10 billion in unpaid bills. People aren't happy with how things are going. And I think the curtain's been pulled back, and people are starting to see that Madigan's been in power for decades. And Democrats lost their veto-proof supermajority after the election. We'll see how that changes the dynamic in Springfield.
Well, that's a good point, Todd. The Democrats lost 4 seats in the House, 2 seats in the Senate. The supermajority is no longer there. Is that a significant watershed moment?
I don't think so, because I think a lot of people ignore the fact that even though there were 71 Ds in the House, that they weren't actually voting in one consistent block. Because the fact that they did propose a spending plan at the end of May, that when it came back to the House, they weren't able to get enough support to actually hold the supermajority. So the bottom line is, while the actual letter next to the name may have changed, I'm not sure the votes will change as it relates to issues as important as the budget.
Just a few seconds left. Does it look like we're in for more stalemate in Springfield until the end of the year?
Well, until the end of the year, and possibly the duration of Rauner's term.
Yeah. And is that how you see it as well?
I think it's definitely going to be a lot of hard fights. A lot of big decisions are coming up. I would tend to agree with what Dave just said.
That's not good news as we look forward to this budget stalemate possibly ending. Thanks to our guests, Todd Belcourt, Hillary Gowans, and Dave McKinney. We've seen Chicago professional athletes suffer from concussions, most recently Doug McDermott from the Bulls, but increasingly more children are diagnosed with concussions too. Lauren Cohn has that story.
Chris, the fall happens to be the peak time of year for children diagnosed with concussions. That's attributed mostly to sports being played like football and soccer. And now a new report shows concussion diagnosis for Illinois kids has climbed more than 80%. 12-year-old Yanni Katsogridakis loves sports, but his favorite is football.
I like the contact and the thrill of it, and I like how much action there is on every play.
About 6 weeks ago, the sixth grader who plays with Chicago's Northside Youth Football League took a hard hit during a game.
I was playing fullback, and I ran down the middle, and I was going, and I had one guy hit me low, and then two guys hit me high, and my head hit the ground.
Yanni was immediately evaluated by an athletic trainer who determined he had suffered a concussion.
I could not answer the months of the year.
That must have been scary.
Yeah.
The Northside Youth Football League is not required by Illinois law to provide athletic trainers at games. Neither are schools. But in 2011, a state law was passed requiring public high school athletes suspected of having a concussion be pulled from practice in games and not only be evaluated by a licensed healthcare professional, but also be cleared to resume play. That law was expanded this year. However, youth sports organizations are exempt due to the added cost. Mike Lohman, president of Northside Youth Football, says his league is able to afford athletic trainers, and it's made a huge difference in diagnosing concussions.
Years ago, he would have got up, he would have been told, shake it off, toughen up, right? Maybe gotten sent to the sideline for a play, been given some water, and put right back in the game. And as we've learned now from research, that has been one of the major causes of long-term damage from concussions.
That concussion research drew national attention as thousands of pro football players filed lawsuits against the NFL after they were diagnosed with chronic traumatic encephalopathy, a neurodegenerative disease associated with repeated head trauma. Football was put even further under the microscope after the December 2015 release of the movie Concussion, about Dr. Bennett Omalhu, a Nigerian pathologist first to discover CTE in American football players.
The NFL does not want to talk to you. They have to listen to us. This is bigger than they are.
Mike Lohman says today youth football is also safer because spear tackling, where athletes lead with their heads, has been eliminated, and rules against illegal hits are increasingly enforced. But even he admits all sports organizations can do more.
Even though more and more people are aware, it still isn't seeped into our culture of youth sports and high school sports.
Dr. Rebecca Carl treats children with concussions here at Lurie Children's Hospital, where she is a specialist in pediatric sports medicine. She says a new Blue Cross Blue Shield report that shows concussion diagnosis for Illinois kids jumped 83% between 2010 and 2015 is good news, and partly due to awareness.
We are now casting a wider net for diagnosing concussions. Until the early 2000s, we really didn't diagnose concussions unless children had loss of consciousness. We've changed that. The other piece to this is that we have more children involved in sports.
Dr. Carl says the sports medicine community is also keeping kids who suffer concussions in recovery for longer periods of time, making sure they are healed. Lurie Children's Hospital has partnered with many schools and leagues like Northside Youth Football, educating coaches, staff, and trainers about warning signs and symptoms like dizziness, vomiting, dehydration, and pain.
If I had a child who wanted to be a professional football player, I have to say that would worry me. I think that there's data coming out that a high percentage of professional collision sport athletes have neurologic problems. I don't think how that happens exactly is well known, but do I think that we should restrict children at the Pop Warner football level, at the recreational and high school level? No, I don't think we have the evidence to say that.
So he rolled a 1, so he...
As a father and also an ER doctor at Lurie Children's Hospital, Dr. Yanni Katsogridakis has always worried about his son playing football.
I'd be very happy if he didn't want to play football, if he chose a different sport as his primary sport, but that's the sport that he really wants to play. So our goal is to make it and see that he's doing it as safely as possible.
I don't think there's much more you can do. You can't make a injury-proof game. So you take the risk when you start playing.
The Illinois Department of Public Health also reports an increase in the number of concussions for children ages 10 to 19 between 2010 and 2015, though its data is limited to hospital visits. And doctors do point out that not all concussions are sports related. For more on concussion diagnosis and protocols, go to wycc.org and connect to In the Loop. Chris?
Thank you, Lauren. 50 years ago, a Chicago man started selling a magical machine that has delighted children ever since. And now a family business is keeping the tradition alive, creating more memories along the way.
Hey, watch.
Childhood memories are created here. Generations of children in the Chicago area have done exactly what this little boy is doing. Placing money inside this uniquely shaped vending machine and watching magic unfold. Mold-A-Rama's history dates back to 1966, the year it debuted in Chicago. 5 years later, a local businessman named Bill Jones helped the struggling company stay here. In 1971, Jones took over the previous owners' two Chicago area accounts, the Museum of Science and Industry and the Brookfield Zoo. He never knew his investment would stand the test of time. Now his son Paul carries on his legacy.
Mold-A-Rama, well, it started out just to be this unique idea of a vending machine that could actually make you your souvenir in front of you in less than a minute.
Paul Jones has taken over the daily operations of the family-run company.
So you can put in a mix of dollars, quarters, dimes, nickels, even $5 bills, up to the $2 vend price, and the machine goes automatically as soon as you get the right money in. So the molds are going to clamp together. Those molds are cold, they're chilled at about 45 degrees. As soon as they close, plastic is injected, then air blows through, blows out all the extra plastic back into the hot plastic area. And then it's going to open up, and what we call the shovel is going to kick it out into the pan. Now the production is all done. Now the machine is catching up so it can make another one.
This blue dolphin figurine is the most popular mold sold at Brookfield Zoo. In addition to both Chicago zoos, Mold-A-Rama machines are found in Willis Tower, the Field Museum, the Museum of Science and Industry, Milwaukee County Zoo, San Antonio Zoo, Como Park Zoo in St. Paul, Minnesota, and the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan. It's been 50 years since Mold-A-Rama was first introduced at Brookfield Zoo. This year, the zoo has been celebrating that milestone.
Mold-A-Rama is something that you experience as a kid, you experience with your kids, and then grandkids and everything else too.
When these machines were first introduced, the molds cost a quarter. 50 years later, they go for $2. Other than that price increase, not much has changed, including the look of the machines. However, Paul has plans to introduce some subtle changes.
Eventually, we'd like the credit card swipes on it. And we're doing little things to make sure that the machines stay looking like they are originally, but they update to where it's a little bit easier to take care of them. So we're looking at 50 years old equipment that's got new technology inside it.
For Lauren Cohn, I'm Chris Bury. Good night.